What is up, everybody? This is Nick from P2W Fantasy with my buddy Chris Robin at Detroit Beastie, and we are going to recap Week 3, talk about Week 4, and hit some other good topics per usual. Got the hang of it now. I was clicking that picture the one time, and it wasn't doing anything, so that makes sense. What is up? Like I said before, talking Week 3 here. Going into Week 4 and hitting some topics here with my buddy Chris. Chris, what is up, man? How are you doing?
Nothing. Thanks for having me. I had other things planned on the schedule last week, so thanks for giving me a pass. I know we have a mutual understanding. You send a paycheck, I go live on your show, and unfortunately, there was no show. There was a show, but I wasn't with you. But guess what? I'm keeping the paycheck.
Oh, that's good. That's good. We had to make sure that you were going to return. You know, you get a little nervous sometimes when a guy takes a break. Is it going to be a short break, a long-term break? But right back at it. Had Dave Wright and Kevin on last time. I know you've been on live streams with Kevin before. Great guy right there. We had a good session, but I'm glad you and I can get back at it today. Just briefly here, can you talk about what you got going on before we dive in? I know you just released a big-time article today. Maybe just give us a little bit of an insight there.
Yeah, my bread and butter since day one. This article is going on, I believe, 5 years now. Bottom of the barrel. It's my DFS article. If you don't know, it's pinned on my Twitter at Detroit Beastie. It just goes over some very cheaply owned guys that are going to have low exposure, low owned guys, so where you can, pick and choose in with your studs. We know we're going to start Patrick Mahomes. We know we're going to start Derrick Henry, but we have a salary cap there. Let me help you read bottom of the barrel. It's been a huge success, and it's honestly my favorite thing that I do really ever in terms of reading and writing and fantasy stuff. It's just such a fun article, and I'm allowed to just do what I want with it in terms of the players I call, the pictures I put, the synopsis on there. I'm able to have complete, creative freedom. So I run with it, and people are really loving it. They're sharing it. So who am I to be rude? They say give the people what they want. And hopefully you guys want more bottom of the barrel.
Yeah, I like to read it myself because I like how you say, hey, here's your premium shiny Lamar Jackson, or you can have, a Ryan Fitzpatrick, or you go down the list like that. I like how you see the top of the line, but also where you can get some steals. So it is a good article that I read myself every week. Diving into just a quick Week 3 recap. Just going to go down the list of some more injuries. We know that Week 2 had some really bad ones. We lost Saquon. We lost McCaffrey for a couple weeks. There was a bunch of guys that got banged up. Week 3, there was also a lot of injuries. Knock on wood, not as many intense ones outside of maybe Tariq Cohen with that ACL tear. That was pretty bad.
Awful.
But, down the list, Jordan Reed had a few injuries. Dallas Goedert with an ankle. Deshaun Jackson hamstring, Russell Gage and Deontay Johnson both on concussion protocol. Brian Edwards ankle, John Brown calf, Tariq Cohen we said with the ACL. Jerick McKinnon's got something going on. Chris Godwin might miss multiple games with the hamstring. Amari Cooper left for a little bit. I think he might be all right. And then Chris Carson, we saw the alligator roll. One of the dirtiest things I've seen in a long time. From the Cowboys. I won't even say the guy's name. I don't want to give him the time of day. But
I don't even know his name. Is he a nobody? He must be, somebody if he was on the field at that portion of the game. So you don't want to say he's a nobody. He's a pro football player. But how awful was that? I mean, that's just unbelievably silly.
Yeah. So, I mean, having 2 weeks of a list of injuries like that, it's really important to stay on. I released my waiver wire article, and there's tons that you can read, but it's important to stay on top of those sort of articles and look at your league and see, maybe your team wasn't affected, but some other teams were, and that's where some trade talks can happen. So it's definitely important to be aware of injuries, not just your own injuries going into the season.
That's it. And if you give me a moment, the toughest one that I think was Tariq Cohen. And I'm not just saying that because I know you're a Chicago guy. You got the Sox jersey on. But he gets that sweet spot in a deep lineup, in a deep PPR format. Like him and James White, like those two guys are as good as gold in fantasy leagues. And when he goes down like that, it's awful because he's a good human being. It seems he's humble. He goes about his business, and they give him targets and touches, and he flourishes. And it's just, excuse me, awful to see a guy, end his season in such a crappy fashion.
Real quick here, not a big fan of this guy, but I guess I'll read off his question. It's Anthony from P2W Fantasy. Would you trade Mostert for Burkhead and Logan Ryan in IDP Dynasty? Chris, you're an IDP guy. What do you think of that?
Absolutely not. Burkhead, we know what we're getting with Burkhead. He has one, maybe two of these games a year, but we never know when they're coming. I mean, let's look back at the calendar. You can set your watch that it's going to happen. He had a game just like this last season, and he already had his last week in week 3. In terms of Logan Ryan, he's a good kid, a good IDP guy, but more than likely he was a waiver wire ad. So Burkhead and Logan Ryan are waiver wire ads, and you're going to get taken to the cleaners for Mostert, who, if we look back, was drafted in, fifth, sixth round. So you're going to trade two waiver wire. You're going to receive, two waiver wire guys for a 5th, 6th round pick. I wouldn't do it. Mostert could actually be back this weekend. I'm not counting on it, but he's right around the corner from being back. So absolutely not. I'm keeping Mostert.
Yeah, I know Anthony was actually on the Burkhead side of that, so I think he was just throwing that in there. We had a phone conversation about that sort of offer, and he kind of felt bad about it, to be honest. But, moving forward here, let's look at some top 5 performances per position, and then we'll look at some of the bottom guys. May not necessarily be in order for the bottom guys, but, for running backs and wide receivers with so many guys that got touches, I'm just grabbing guys that are names we expect to see better out of. But looking at the QBs here, I'll read the top 5, and then I'll read the ones that were bad, and I'll let you go first. You just let me know some quick thoughts on either side of it, both sides, whatever you want to do, Chris.
Absolutely.
QBs down the list here. Patrick Mahomes absolutely destroyed the Ravens defense with 40 points. Number 2, Russell Wilson, 36.8. Josh Allen, 3, 32.24. Dak Prescott, number 4, 29.48, and then Jared Goff, 28.24 for the top 5. And I get those from Fantasy Pros PPR. Well, obviously not for the quarterbacks, but everything else will be PPR for the
We get it. I understand.
Yeah. The bottom of the list here, Daniel Jones, 9.06, Sam Darnold, 9.72, Minshew, 10.2, Jeff Driscoll, 11.44, who's getting benched now, and Dwayne Haskins, 12.16. So, Chris, give me some quick thoughts. And Kevin says
Pat Mahomes, absolute stud. I mean, what more do you want from Patrick Mahomes? He's the quintessential QB1. Everybody drafted him as such. He's doing exactly what we thought he was going to do. He is an absolute monster stud. The most surprising thing, I don't want to say surprising, but the most exciting quarterback to me in the top 5 this past week was Jared Goff. I mean, we know he can be a good quarterback, a good fantasy quarterback. Excuse me. They played the Bills. He racked up 300 yards through the air, 3 touchdowns. It was fantastic. And listen, the Super Bowl season, he played terrific. Last season was kind of a wash, let's say. We'll just chalk it up to, growing pains. I don't know. The kid's still in his early 20s. But hopefully this is the Jared Goff we see on a consistent basis now. And it just excites me. I own Jared Goff in a deep 14-team PPR dynasty, and I'm loving what I'm seeing from Goff. I think he's here to stay. And to be honest with you, that team around him isn't half bad. And when I say not half bad, he's able to, put up games like this on a consistent basis where maybe they fall behind like they did, in Buffalo. So whatever it takes, Jared Goff is going to be the guy. And I'm very excited for that. On the bottom 5 kind of guys, all to be expected aside from like Minshew. He played on Thursday. Everybody had high hopes for him. He didn't do much. He absolutely, hammered our lineups early, and taking low points like that as at the quarterback position on a Thursday just sets you up for like a sequence of bummer events, for the weekend. One thing, maybe it's not so surprising, but a lot of people would say Dwayne Haskins isn't a good NFL quarterback. And I don't know how many times People have to see it before they start jumping ship. And I think everybody's right about there right now. I don't think he has a much longer in terms of a starting quarterback for Washington. I read an article about 20 minutes ago saying he has a very short leash there now in Washington. So I don't know about you, but I've never owned any portion of him, and it's an awful circumstance if that's your quarterback for fantasy purposes.
Yeah, just riding on that train a little bit more. I was reading also just some quotes from Rivera saying that, he sort along these lines, like he's our guy, but there was always this but next to it, but, and then they'd have some sort of sentence next to it. So I think with Rivera, coming into this team, that's supposed to be their franchise guy. He trades for, his second string quarterback from the previous year that got a lot of time. I don't think that the timeline for Haskins is going to be much longer. We might see the last start for him this week. I wouldn't be surprised if Kyle Allen steps in. Alex Smith, I think they're a little hesitant.
I agree.
To throw him on the field. He was inactive the week before, but I wouldn't be surprised if after this week, Kyle Allen is named the starter. And you can look at, this Washington team is not good in a lot of different spots. It's not just the quarterback, but at the same time, he does have some nice guys that he could utilize. He has some, receivers that are capable of making some plays. The offensive line isn't like the worst in the league. It's not like the Giants, where Daniel Jones is struggling to, not get touched every play. But I think he's on his last wit's end here. And on the positive side of things, Mahomes, it's scary to see him do that to the Ravens defense because I thought the Ravens defense were going to be, the best defense in the league, in my opinion, this year. Them are Pittsburgh Steelers with maybe Buffalo right underneath. But if he's going to, play with that defense the way he did, under the hand throws to the fullback, and he's throwing 60+ yards or whatever it was to Mecole Hardman and just super comfortable, and he's having fun. That's scary for the league. But I also like to continue to see Russell Wilson and Josh Allen continue to be on that MVP race sort of train right now. I'm waiting for, the first sign of them slowing down, and it's not been there for 3 straight weeks now.
And these aren't my words or my own synopsis, because they said it a few times. Like Brian Greasy mentioned it a few times last night. When Mahomes gets out of the pocket and they pressure him and he rolls out like in between the numbers and he just turns and squares his hip and he flings that, but you can't defend that, right? Because you'll see, Kelsey will come up on like a rub or a seam route, right? And then he'll just plant, boom, right in the center of the field, turn. And at the same time, you have, as I said, you have Pat Mahomes swing out, square his hips. But I mean, any one of this, he hit Sammy Watkins on numerous plays like that.
Yep.
He hit, as I said, he hit Kelsey like that. You can't defend that because at a certain point, they have 5 or 6 well-rounded offensive individuals on that team, and you have to defend them all. And again, I heard them say last night, when they're playing New England next weekend. And I know Belichick completely took away Waller. Waller didn't do a thing. And he's not going to be able to do that for a Kansas City team who was loaded off. Kelsey, Tyreek, I mean, the list goes on. So I'm interested to see how that game breaks out. Maybe we can talk about this next week. I look forward to that.
Yeah.
But what's Belichick going to do? You take away Tyreek Hill and Kelsey, you have Hardman and Robinson, and the list just goes on. So that team is crazy. And, I don't think it'd be weird for me to say good luck beating them. Do they go 16-0? At this rate, yeah.
Yeah, I think the only upcoming game that in my opinion, I think could challenge them more than the rest of these games is the Bills, just because the Bills got that good defense and their offense is very explosive right now. So that's a team I could see maybe challenging them, but challenging and beating are 2 very different things. So looking at the running backs here, 1 through 5, we have Kamara, 44.7. Rex Burkhead, we just talked about, 34.8. Austin Eckler, my guy, 31.3. James Robinson, 30.9. And then Derrick Henry having a bit of a bounce back performance at 27. Then on the opposite spectrum of performance, we have Mark Ingram with 3 points, Leonard Fournette with 4.2, Joshua Kelly with 5.2, Dave Montgomery 7.4, and Melvin Gordon 7.8. I think for me, the obvious ones that stand out, I'm not going to look too much into Burkhead because James White has some family things going on. He capitalized very well on, him being out for that. But James Robinson is going to be a guy that I think is going to go off again this week because it's the Bengals defense. And I think he's a guy this year that if you plugged him into your lineup, you're doing well right now. I mean, he was a waiver guy. Nobody drafted him unless you're in a deep dynasty league. Because even in my dynasty leagues, he went undrafted because he was undrafted for the Jaguars, and they still had Leonard Fournette at the time. So I do like the way that he's trending right now, and he's getting a ridiculous amount of touches. Nice to see Austin Eckler connect with Justin Herbert because we didn't know how that was going to look. With Tyrod Taylor, Austin Eckler wasn't looking too good. He wasn't getting the pass catching out of the backfield. With Herbert, I think he had like 11 catches. That's awesome. Opposite spectrum here. The main thing I'm taking away from these guys is, for me, Mark Ingram just shows that you can't trust any of the Baltimore backs right now. They're all getting too many touches between him, J.K. Dobbins, and Gus Edwards. They're all touching the ball too much right now. And with Mark Ingram supposedly being their guy going into the year, at least, it's not looking too good for fantasy. If they run the ball 60 times in a game, it's probably still not looking good for fantasy. So those are my just quick takes on running backs.
The one person I want to hit home, and I'll hammer him home if I have to, Austin Eckler. This guy was a monster in week 3. He had 11 targets and 11 receptions. That is phenomenal. It's outstanding. I don't know how many other verbs I can say. And you alluded to it. The connection between him and Herbert is there. We've seen it. That's everyone was iffy when Tyrod was the quarterback. He didn't have a good, week, not by Austin Eckler's, where we drafted him, let's say. But if week 3 is any indication about the rest of the season, then I want any and all shares of Austin Eckler as I can get. He's absolutely firmly in the RB1 territory, top 10 without a doubt. J-Rob, I love the kid. I added him. I think I sent a photo to my followers last week. Actually, I think it was Friday. I added him off waivers out of nowhere on the 4th, right at the beginning of this month.
Now you're happy.
Not expecting much, and guess what happened on Sunday after the late games? I traded J-Rob straight up for Miles Sanders in Philadelphia, and it hurt to lose a kid like that because correct me if I'm wrong here, but when I add a guy like J-Rob, he's gone nuts. A star was born right in front of our eyes on Thursday. I feel like, like you nurture him, like he's my baby. And, it's weird, trading him. And if you do, you want a ton back because your own personal value is just so high on that guy. But to get Miles Sanders back for J-Rob, that's a no-brainer, all day. Will I live to regret it? I don't know. But owning Miles Sanders for J-Rob is fantastic. On the other side of the coin, the 5 low men, we'll call them, Josh Kelly, who was played right next to or behind Austin Eckler. Everybody, touted Kelly up this week. He's the must start. You have to play him. And again, it just goes to show you how wild social media can get, almost like negligent with the advice and or almost toxic with the advice and the things people tell you. Josh Kelly didn't do much. As you reading, I have the same notes you do. He put up 5.2 points, and as you said, that's full PPR if I'm not mistaken. So Austin Eckler is the guy there. Josh Kelly's going to come out. He's going to sell 1 or 2 series, in the game, but you can't start Josh Kelly in an RB spot. He's basically hanging on to a flex role, like, and even I would be a little apprehensive to do that. So, and one more guy I want to mention, or 2 more, David Montgomery and Melvin Gordon. I wouldn't sweat that. Brighter days are ahead. As we said, unfortunately, with Cohen going down, DeMont will, I believe, become the workhorse there. He had how many carries did he have last year? You're the Chicago guy. 242, 243.
Yep.
So the guy can do it. This is a sophomore season. Let's take the kid gloves off of Montgomery and let's let him do it. And then in terms of Melvin Gordon, the guy's a powerhouse. We know he can be a workhorse. He was in LA, or excuse me, what city? San Diego when they were there. Yep. Just a bad week. That's all I chalk it up to. So those guys are going to be fine. Go out and acquire Austin Eckler if you have the means to do so. Absolutely.
Yeah, and with Montgomery, obviously, I hate to see when somebody gets injured and you have people right away tweet the, rising emoji or whatever, but he is a good pass catcher and he doesn't get utilized that way because of Cohen. So now you do have that upside for him. And then Melvin Gordon this week against the Jets, that's a great matchup to run down their throats pretty much. So, yep. I think you hit it on the head with those guys.
Real quick question, if I might.
Sure.
So just real quick, who is the RB2 now in Chicago? So it's David Montgomery, and who else is on the depth chart? Like, who do you expect as a Chicago guy to see, to get, that backup work in Chicago?
In my opinion, I've heard some guys talk about like Null. I think Brian Null, being like a second guy. I think Cordell Patterson just becomes a gadget guy, used a little bit more, where he's going to be catching some passes out of the backfield. He might be getting some random rushing touches now, but for me, that's the guy that just gets a little bit of a bump in his touches. I'm not sure if you have a different opinion on that.
No, to be honest with you, I had no opinion. That's why I was asking you. Of all the I's to dot and the T's to cross in this fantasy stuff that we do, I have yet to look into the Chicago Bears backfield.
Yeah, I think it's just going to be him, more of a gadget guy, just sweeps and different things like that. So that's what I envision. Looking ahead at the wide receivers here, number 1, Tyler Lockett, 37 points. Justin Jefferson with 30.5 on a breakout game right there.
Mm-hmm.
Keenan Allen, 30.2. Allen Robinson, 28.3. And then Cedric Wilson of the Cowboys, 27.7.
Who did you say?
Cedric Wilson. Remember the name. Maybe not. Maybe not.
Yeah. Yes, I will.
Yeah. Maybe tonight. But on the other side of it, we got Marquise Brown, 3.3. Edelman, 4.2. Brandon Cooks, 5.3. Slayton, 6.3. And my guy, DJ Moore, 8.5. Chris, what stands out to you either side?
Allen Robinson. Again, I'm sure that's music to your ears. Now, Allen Robinson is a local kid, born and raised right, in Detroit. I could say that he can play, and it's just fantastic. The stock market emoji is only going to go up now with Nick Foles at quarterback. Mitch wasn't the guy. A lot, the smart people among us, we knew, what's the point in having Mitch Trubisky as your quarterback? No offense, Nick, but Nick Foles coming into that offense and running that offense is only good news for A-Rob and even Anthony Miller. I know Anthony Miller isn't on the top 5 or the bottom 5, but you saw what both of them did with a full half of Nick Foles at quarterback. So Allen Robinson gets a he's a top 10 wide receiver. He was being drafted as such, over the summer, but with 2 weeks, people panic pretty quick. 3 weeks, people panic pretty quick, but bam, he shot back up to that. Jefferson, hopefully this is signs the thing to come. I don't think the kid is going to have 100. Obviously, he's not going to have 170 yards and multiple touchdowns every game. But I think we're seeing the benefit, hate it or love it. I think that the case of Jefferson just speaks volumes of the importance of a preseason. That was week 3 last Sunday, and they had no preseason. So if they played 3 or 4 preseason games, the math, it all lines up in my head. Although I can't, express it. But Jefferson is a guy you want to add. I know I've seen him at waiver wire number 1, add this week. If you're, in a league where Justin Jefferson is on the waiver wire, I would look for another league to play in.
I was about to say, none of my leagues. None of my leagues.
Absolutely not. And real quick, before I go to the bottom 5, I want to give Tyler Lockett an apology. I've said it for like a month or so now. I don't get the allure of Tyler Lockett. I've never been a big Tyler Lockett guy, and he's making me and anybody else who doubts him pretty silly. And it just happens you have a stud sophomore wide receiver in DK Metcalf, and you have, Russell Wilson is unbelievably good. So Lockett, I apologize, my friend. Hopefully we can come to better terms in the future. On the bottom 5, just 2 guys I want to hit on real quick. Hollywood Brown, what a disappointment he was last night. I think he was targeted a bunch, but he just didn't catch very many passes. No touchdown. I know if you guys remember, there was a play where Lamar absolutely underthrew him. And if he would, that was a 75-yard touchdown. If you remember what play I'm talking about, Hollywood Brown was streaking down the side of the field. And
Yep.
I don't know what happened if Lamar, limp wristed it or he didn't. He threw off his back foot, but that was a dime touchdown if it was, on the money. I wouldn't freak out about Hollywood Brown. He's still the man there. Pay no attention to week 3. Chalk it up as an error. One guy I want to mention again real quick in the bottom 5 is Darius Slayton for the Giants. Guy had a fantastic week 1. Everybody was, talking about him, touting him, adding him. And I've long said that Slayton is basically just like a McCole Hardman kind of guy. He's a very boom or bust. And what week will it be a boom? I don't think they're few and far between. Let me say that. So it warrants me not, really wanting to own him or start him. He's better left for DFS formats when the matchup based DFS formats. In your seasonal league, I wouldn't bother. If you own him, I'd try to sell him if you could. I mean, take it easy. Don't trade him away for nothing. But we're going to get a lot of games like this from Darius Slayton. So it's unfortunate, but well deserved in the bottom 5 this week, if that makes sense.
Yeah, kind of similar to what you said about Lockett, about kind of writing him off and not really buying into him or drafting him anywhere. I was the same way about Keenan Allen, and I think I might have been pretty off about that just because now I'm seeing Mike Williams be traditionally banged up. Hunter Henry's doing well at tight end, but seeing Keenan Allen have 19 targets last game shows that Herbert's going to look for him on almost every other play. So he's a guy I wasn't buying into that much, but if he's going to receive even close to 19, if he's going to receive 12 targets a game, that's fantasy. So you got to roll with that. And he's a guy I just really wasn't into this offseason.
I'm such a huge Herbert fan. Look at what he's doing, 2 weeks in. Not on the field for the city and his team, what he's doing for us, helping us out with Eckler and Keenan Allen. So God love the kid. God bless him.
I think he helps the skill players in fantasy for sure. That's just what I see out of him. On the opposite spectrum here, I think Brandon Cooks is going to be better. I really do. I got a feeling he will be because someone's got to connect with Watson, and I'm not buying into Fuller being a 16-game, high guy for Watson. So I still like that. Marquise Brown, I have mixed feelings about because I just don't think that he's doing much right now. I think we saw last year glimpses of him going off and having these connections, but I saw twice during this game, balls be in his hands, he gets hit, and the ball is on the ground. So I'm not sure if it's a strength thing or what the case is, if it's the delivery of the pass, but he didn't look too good yesterday. And I still do have some faith in DJ Moore, even though Robbie Anderson looks like the guy right now. I think DJ Moore is just too talented. He's too talented not to be good.
I'm with you on that one, yes.
Tight ends we'll go through fast here. Going down the list, Jimmy Graham, 24 points. Croft, 18.4 from the Bills. Ebron, 16.2. Tanyan from the Packers, 16. Kelsey, 14.7. Then on the opposite spectrum here, you would think that these guys might be your top half, but they were towards the bottom. All guys, I won't say their points, but all guys were under 6 points. But Waller, Chris Herndon, Mark Andrews, Evan Ingram, and Austin Hooper. For me, just like you said with Allen Robinson, Jimmy Graham, father time, I think he caught I think he was targeted 7 times out of 9 when Nick Foles hit the field, which shows you that he's going to be part of Nick Foles' plan, which is he going to be a guy you're going to plug into your lineup every week? I don't know. It depends on – I wrote this in my article. It depends on who you drafted. Like, I had high hopes for Herb Smith Jr. and Chris Herndon. They're both duds this year. So if Jimmy Graham is the only guy, on your waiver wire, you might have to pay for him at this point because some guys are just very – Austin Hooper, too. He's had a terrible season, and he's not included into that game plan almost at all. So I think Jimmy Graham could be a guy, if you're in a pinch, he's probably going to be targeted more than these other guys. Croft's got the start over Dawson Knox. I think that's going to be an asterisk for him. On the other side, Darren Waller, we mentioned before, he almost didn't play in this game, so I don't look at this performance as anything more than he probably was very limited and got shut down because he was limited. Mark Andrews dropped a ball in the end zone. We watched that. He dropped a couple passes. Nick Boyle was the one that came down with the touchdown, but nothing crazy with these guys. I mean, tight ends this year have been so all over the place for me, unless it's Travis Kelce, Waller on most weeks. Kittle's been hurt, so I can't even say Kittle. So it's been so weird for me with tight ends.
No doubt. Two guys I want to mention in the top 5. One guy's in and one guy's not, but it's the Buffalo Bills tight ends, Tyler Kroft and Dawson Knox. Buffalo has entered that area where you want and I need any and all pieces from that offense. With Josh Allen playing that way, you could do worse with one of those tight ends. Buffalo joins, let's say, Kansas City, Seattle, and even, Baltimore as offenses. I don't care how I get it. I just want a piece of that offense. So Kroft absolutely is on a waiver wire. Dawson Knox more than likely is on a waiver wire. I would prioritize Knox over the veteran Kroft, but I don't have a problem adding those guys. And in the bottom 5, Ingram and Hooper. Hooper doesn't even look like he's part of Cleveland's game plan at all. Austin Hooper is droppable, absolutely. And he was a guy I talked about all summer that he wasn't going to live up to the hype, wasn't going to do much because of all the the gears on that team. And then Evan Ingram, I have no ill will towards him. He's just not a tight end one to me, personally. He's had, I think he had a 3 touchdown game last season or even the season before. He's just not consistent enough for me to start him day in and day out. And it's unfortunate because if you drafted him, I would be willing to bet that's the only tight end you drafted. You drafted Ingram, you're thinking, I got a tight end 1, I'm good to go. I would start looking for other options if I was an Evan Ingram owner. Mark Andrews is going to be fine. One of them nights. Baltimore looked flustered, playing the best football team in the world. And Darren Waller will be fine. I mentioned it, the open of the broadcast. Bill Belichick made it a point to, take him out of the game. So Waller will be fine. Herndon, it's a bummer. The Jets are a bummer. Adam Gase, I could see them losing to Denver on Thursday and Gase out of work by Friday. So
Yep. I think that would help the likes of a guy like Chris Herndon, who's not being utilized at all, even with these guys being hurt. I mean, Crowder hurt, Perryman's hurt. I mean, not that I'm naming guys that are world beaters, but still, with all these injuries, you're having these guys, Braxton Berrios, stepping up versus Chris Herndon, which is weird. But yeah, let's get into our next segment here. I had an article about this. I think it was over the summer. It was called the Dr. Jekyll or Mr. Hydes of 2019, which basically most of us know the fairy tale or whatever it is, the fictional story, Dr. Jekyll, Mr. Hyde. We're just saying the good or the bad. So we'll say Dr. Jekyll is the good, I'm pretty sure, right, Chris?
Yeah.
Mr. Hyde's the bad guy? All right. I want to make sure I'm not mixing things up here. But let's look into a couple guys here. I got a list of guys, and let's categorize them as rest of season. Are these guys going to be a Dr. Jekyll or are they going to be a Mr. Hyde? So basically, are we going to see more good rest of the season or more bad instead of the back and forth? So I got a couple guys per position here. I'll read off the 2 quarterbacks I wrote down and let me know what you think rest of the season. Dr. Jekyll, good. Mr. Hyde, bad rest of the season. Gardner Minshew. Here, I'm going to read the points. Not PPR again, but I'm going to read the points straight across from weeks 1 to 3 here. So Gardner Minshew, 20.82, 23.46, and 9.2 had a dud against the Dolphins. And then Carson Wentz, 13, 12.38, and then 21.5. So Minshew had 2 pretty good games and then a bad one there. And then Carson Wentz has been pretty bad, and then this past week had a little bit better of a game here. So rest of the season, what do we think about these guys?
Well, Gardner Minshew is the poster boy for Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde. He'll have a good week or 2, and then he'll put up a clunker like he did on Thursday. So to be honest with you, I think we're in for more Hyde weeks than we are Dr. Jekyll. But another quarterback, another fantasy player that you're only playing him when the matchup is right, when it's a plus matchup, when it's a green matchup, at the bottom half of a defense. He's in Cincinnati this weekend, and Cincinnati does very well against the pass. I think they've given up the the fifth fewest yards per attempt. So Minshew, is in for another bad week on Sunday. And then when it comes to Wentz, he's at San Francisco. I know I'm looking, just for 1 week, but overall, I don't know what do we have with Carson Wentz. I can't put my finger on it. So to be honest with you, I can't answer that question one way or another. I'll say he's both. 1 week he's going to score pass for 3 touchdowns, maybe rush for one, and then he's going to drink that juice and become a monster, a Hyde. And he's been pretty nasty the last few weeks. So I'm thinking both of these guys. I'm looking for other options if I have both quarterbacks. Minshew, it's easier because more than likely you didn't draft him as your quarterback one. You took him in the late rounds just to have a backup quarterback or some depth. But with Wentz, he was drafted at his ADP projected him to be a top 10 overall quarterback.
Not higher.
Yeah, and it's been unbelievably nasty. And at this point, I think you have to have him you have to start him on your roster. If you have no other options, more than likely you don't. And I don't think very many people, would trade for him. And if they do, his value is as low as it can get right now. So we're stuck in this, purgatory of what the heck do we do with Carson Wentz?
Yeah, I look at their schedule and, Gardner Minshew, Chargers defense, which is they can make some plays at times. I know they have some guys banged up, but Pittsburgh's down the line, Baltimore's down the line, Chicago's down the line. So he's got some tough games coming up. And then Carson Wentz, the next 3 matchups in order are San Francisco, Pittsburgh, and then Baltimore. Okay. So, I mean, man, if you counted on starting Wentz this year, I mean, I don't blame you because he's been good. He's been good. But with having these bad outings, and now you're going to play 3 of the maybe top 5 to 7 defenses in the league, that's going to be a rough outing for him. Is there any chance we see Jalen Hurts?
Yes, I think so. And on a personal note, I would love to see that. Just see what this kid can do. They drafted him in the 2nd round. And at the time we're like, why would you do that when you have Carson Wentz and he signed that massive $125 million contract, but then you draft a quarterback in the 2nd round, and it didn't sit well with me. So maybe this organization knows something we don't in terms of work ethic, maybe, or some weird soft tissue injury that we don't know about. So I believe we do see Jalen Hurts at some point, but Philly isn't going to just give up on Wentz, 3 or 4 weeks in. So I would consider Hurts making an appearance, let's say after their bye week, which I don't know. I'm going to guess week 6 or 7. So we might see him week 8 or later.
All right. Going to the running backs here. I got 4 guys. I'll read you their points over 3 weeks in order. And then we'll go through them. I got 4. So David Montgomery, we actually talked about him a little bit already, so let's just make it 3 here. David Johnson, 19.9, 7, 12.6. Todd Gurley, 13.7, 6.1, 15.2. And then the last guy here, I really don't know if he's had a good game, but Joe Mixon, 6.1, 12.6, and 8.5. What are we thinking about the category for these guys here?
All 3 guys are going to be fine. All 3 guys give me that Dr. Jekyll, vibe. They're going to be fine. Looking at their schedule, David Johnson plays Minnesota this weekend, and even last week, he rushed 13 times. His yards per attempt were awful. It was 1.8, yards a carry. His longest run was 5 yards. But this week, as I said, versus Minnesota, everything's going to be fine. He's going to get around 20-21 total targets and touches. That means, rushing attempts and receiving work. So David Montgomery is going to be fine. I'm not worried about him. I love his, the next few games in his schedule. Todd Gurley's another guy I'm not worried about. If you look at last week, he had 14 attempts for 80 yards. That's at a 5.7 yard clip per rushing attempt, which is pretty, that's healthy. And he can only do better, at Green Bay. I believe that game's on Sunday night or Monday night. I believe it's Monday Night Football. Atlanta's in Green Bay. So Todd's going to be fine. I'm not worried about him. And then Joe Mixon, He's been the biggest letdown so far. He's definitely, if not, he's definitely on my short list of like 3 guys that have been the biggest, bummers so far. But again, you have to take anybody that's watching live or will listen to this tomorrow or whatever you do. Take what we're saying with a grain of salt, because we've only played 3 weeks. Been no preseason, as I said in the opening, so we're going into week 4. Everything's going to be fine with these guys. They will, start to hit their averages in terms of yardage and rushing attempts and all that. The first few weeks, I feel like, coaches in the league have been doing that like as a feel out process. And he gets Jacksonville. I'm talking about Mixon. Gets Jacksonville this weekend. So what better time than this weekend to just really burst out and make his owners happy here.
David Johnson, what I liked to read about him was the amount of snaps he's on the field. And, last year with Carlos Hyde pretty much being their running back, he was fine. Hyde was in games. And obviously we put David Johnson on a separate tier than Carlos Hyde from a talent perspective. But I think with David Johnson being on the field that much, even if the Texans struggle, I still think he's going to get the touches, especially with, Duke Johnson, I think, is still banged up, so he doesn't have to compete with somebody for those catches. Texans played Jacksonville 2 times in the next handful of weeks coming up here. Cleveland, Detroit. So he's got some games where he can get the carries necessary to score and do well in fantasy. Todd Gurley, I didn't like how underutilized he was in the passing game. He's not getting that expected maybe Devonta Freeman involvement where he's catching a couple balls a game, 4 or 5 catches a game. But again, look at the schedule: Carolina twice or across a couple weeks here. Your Detroit Lions, Las Vegas Raiders. You have matchups where Gurley is going to be okay in. And if Atlanta throws the ball 60 times a game, you have to count on them being in the red zone, and Todd Gurley in the red zone is the Todd Gurley you want. So absolutely. I think there's some optimism there. And then with Joe Mixon, I think he's the lowest on my list, just because looking at Joe Burrow, 36 attempts, 61 attempts, and then 44 attempts across 3 games. And Joe not catching Austin Eckler numbers. No. He's not catching 6-7 passes a game. Gio Bernard is involved in that offense, and Mixon's not very efficient right now, and it's not a team that's looking to get him involved. So, playing Jacksonville, sure, bounce back game for him. But long term, we saw it last year. He had, a slow start, and then Mixon came back and he was fantasy relevant. But I don't see him being a focal point in this offense right now. I think Joe Burrow being the guy that's going to be slugging the ball 30, 40, 50 times a game, they're more focused on that than getting Mixon involved. So I think he's the lowest on my list. And the thing I will say with these guys, if you are rostering them and you're struggling, don't sell them for dirt cheap, right? Because they're going to have those big games. Gurley's going to have that 20-point game where he scores twice, and David Johnson's going to have a game where he catches 6 balls and scores. So don't give up too early, like you said, after 3 weeks of no preseason, and just give away these guys. You don't want to just give away running backs.
I believe that we're still early enough in the season where you can trade a guy like Mixon or David Johnson for their value is still there. Let's say if this was week 5 or 6 and we're talking Joe Mixon has put up all these duds, you'd have to sell him at a massive discount. I'm not saying Joe Mixon's, price is still where it was a month or so ago, but it hasn't dipped much yet, just in relation to where we're at in the season already, if that makes any sense.
It does. Complete sense. Let's go to the wide receivers now. And for sake of time, we're going to skip over tight ends right now, just because it seems like too many of them are very up and down right now. And, I think the certain guys that we have some optimism on, but wide receivers can be a different beast at times. Cooper Kupp, 8 points, 13 points, then 25.7 this past week. I have Marvin Jones Jr., 9.5, 12.3, 8.1. And then Emmanuel Sanders here, 10.5, 7.8, 15.6. I also had Allen Robinson, but we talked about him enough, so I think we're fine with him. So let's just look at these 3 right now: Cooper Kupp, Emmanuel Sanders, and Marvin Jones. I would put X on Marvin for some reason. Marvin's Jones. It's Marvin Jones.
Marvin
Marvin Jones. Yeah, it's a couple Marvins over here. But yeah, what do you think about these guys?
Kenny G is back and not in full effect yet. I read another article, some Lions beat writer, that says the Lions kind of, limited his snap count, his first week back. But again, guy's a top-notch athlete. He's going to be at full steam, full forward ahead on Sunday. And that only helps Marvin Jones. When you got a guy like Kenny or TJ on the field somewhere, these guys have to be accounted for. And that leaves, Marvin to do his thing. He's a solid wide receiver too on our fantasy teams. And I have no qualms about not using him or trading for him. In terms of, I'm going to lump these next three guys in at once. Kupp, A-Rob, and OBJ. They all led their team in targets on Sunday, and I don't see much changing this week. All three are wide receiver ones on their team. I have no issue with either one of them. The only guy I will mention that's kind of, he gets Hyde-ish at times is OBJ. It's like he only plays when he wants to. He marches to the beat of his own drum. We never know, he strikes me as one of those guys who wakes up Sunday, gets to the stadium, they're on the field warming up, and he tells the coaches or Baker, you know what, I kind of want to have a big game today. Let's make it happen. And then they make it happen for him. If he doesn't speak up, and talk like that, they don't really pay attention to him much. So Kupp, A-Rob, and OBJ, they're all Dr. Jekyll, not worried about them. Marvin is Dr. Jekyll. Sanders is a Hyde. He's in Detroit. He only got 5 targets last week, 4 receptions. All day and week on social media, Manny Sanders was the it guy. You got to play him with no Michael Thomas. Manny Sanders is going to get 10 targets.
And who was it?
And he's going to catch 10 targets. It was Alvin Kamara, basically.
Yeah, and the other guy that stepped up as their wide receiver was Traquan Smith. Had a good outing, and he did well. Emmanuel Sanders, I guess, just could not handle, I don't know, the absence of their alpha. Similar to Marvin Jones here. He can't be the alpha, I don't think. I think he's a good wide receiver. He's very talented. He makes plays. But if he's the alpha, I think he struggles. a little bit. So Kenny Golladay coming back, I think if you had Marvin, now you're a little bit more optimistic that he can find some more field space and not have the best coverage on from the defense.
That's it. And I know we'll get to it in a few moments, but in bottom of the barrel, I mentioned Matthew Stafford as he's probably my favorite start this weekend in terms of DFS quarterbacks. And he hasn't, take this from a guy like me in Detroit, lived here, born and raised. Stafford hasn't looked right, in the first, few games of the season. He's taken a couple, ill-advised sacks, coverage sacks, meaning it was up to him to either throw the ball away or just run out of bounds, let's say. And he hasn't looked right. He hasn't been the Matthew Stafford we all know and love in terms of just chucking the ball and putting up points and stats and all that stuff. But Matthew Stafford is going to find his groove, and hopefully it's this Sunday when New Orleans is in town and he can get everybody involved, because when Stafford's, on point, he is on point, and everybody around him is better for that. So I wouldn't worry one bit about Marvin Jones or anybody else, in that offensive in Detroit. Excuse me.
The only thing I will bring up with OBJ here is that this is a new offense, new head coach, and if somebody was to ask you what's been the big bright spot on this Cleveland offense, what would you say?
It would be the tandem of Kareem Hunt and Nick Chubb. They going into, even a month ago, everyone was like, who do I start if I own both guys? Who would I know when to start all the time? You can safely start both guys. If you own them, you can safely, start them each week on your team. And the results have been absolutely phenomenal so far. And I don't think that's going to change.
Yeah. So I think you hit it right on the head of what I was getting at. I just think that's the power point of their offense. And I think going into the season, maybe some guys who were optimistic about OBJ thought, hey, he's healthy now. He's not banged up. He might be the focal point of this offense as far as airing it out to him. And it's really not the case. It doesn't mean you write him off. It doesn't mean you sell him for cheap or drop him or anything drastic like that. But you do have to understand that this offense is not Baker to OBJ. It's Kareem Hunt eating his, Nick Chubb eating his, and then depending on that game script, then you're going to involve OBJ and Jarvis Landry. That's just how I see it right now.
And correct me if I'm wrong, Nick, but I believe 2 weeks in a row now, Chubb has scored a rushing touchdown and Hunt has had a receiving touchdown. So that's that's the best of both worlds. So again, if you own, Hunt and Chubb on your team, you can start both of them on the same roster, and I wouldn't think twice about it.
I agree with you right there. For the sake of time here, let's get into our starts of the week, and then we'll just see where what we're looking at for time. But a lot of guys to look forward to coming this weekend. Hoping that all the games actually occur. I know there's been a bunch of things that came out with the Titans and the Vikings and COVID related things. So I do hope that we get all the games this weekend in a safe manner. But looking at the QBs first here, who would you say is your start of the week?
Matthew Stafford, as I mentioned a few moments ago. New Orleans is in town. New Orleans is ranked 28th against the pass for, in defensively speaking. But I hope, I said this last week about Detroit and Arizona. I was, very adamant about Arizona just completely blowing us out, and it didn't happen. The Lions actually won for Craig's sake. But Stafford this week, at home against New Orleans this weekend. I see a ton of points. I don't have the over/under in front of me, but I use over/under in tougher start sit decisions, and the over/under has to be over 50. And I'll double check while you're talking about your quarterback. But Matthew Stafford is a start for me. I believe that Stafford, his floor on Sunday is 250 yards and 2 passing touchdowns. So if you can tell me a guy's floor is 250 and 2 touchdowns, I'm starting him every day and twice on Sundays.
All right. Yeah, that makes complete sense to me. My QB that I wrote down was Joe Burrow versus the Jaguars. We saw Fitzmagic last week torch the Jaguars, and Joe Burrow has actually looked very, very good these past 3 weeks. He's throwing the ball a lot. He might be in the top 3 for passing attempts. I could be wrong about that, but he looks good. And seeing a defense get torched in the previous week, and then you see Joe Burrow has been pretty successful, and now he can step in and sling the ball. He's getting connected with Tyler Boyd a lot more. T. Higgins had a huge game last week. Drew Sample wasn't so good last week, but the week before looks like he's syncing with Joe Burrow. So I like him versus the Jaguars this week, and I think he can put up a higher number than some of our top quarterbacks for this week.
I agree 100%. I couldn't have said it better.
With the running backs, mine that I took, I wrote down Dalvin Cook versus the Texans. Houston has been one of the worst against the run. I think they're in the bottom 3 against the run right now. Dalvin Cook, I think, is still, even with Stefanski gone, a major, if not the piece of the offense. I mean, the passing game looked a bit better this past week. I know Cousins has struggled, but Dalvin Cook has been, I think he's the RB. He's a top 5 RB right now. Maybe 4. I could be off by that. But he's been hot. He's been hot. And when the Texans struggle against the run, and you have Dalvin Cook out there, I think he's going to run the ball a lot. And I can see this being a game where he scores potentially twice. So Dalvin Cook is my running back start of the week. Chris, who do you have for running backs?
Well, I did all these notes and I did all this research before we heard what was going on in Tennessee. So my start of the week is James Conner, Pittsburgh's running back, and they're going up against Tennessee, who's ranked 23rd against the rush, but we don't know how it's going to shake out. Last I heard before we, started on this broadcast, they might, leave it and let it go and then maybe play the game Monday. We would have another Monday night doubleheader. Monday Night Football doubleheader. So if that game plays, James Conner is my start of the week. And my backup running back this week is Devin Singletary. They're playing Las Vegas. Las Vegas has looked, fantastic, a lot better than what we thought. What we thought they were. But Moss has had some injuries. I'm not even 100% sure on his status up to this date, Tuesday evening. But Devin Singletary is my start of the week. He's a co-start of the week along with Pittsburgh's running back James Conner.
That's good. That's good that you have a plan A and then a plan A2 going on right there. That's good because we don't know what is going to happen with these games coming up. I'm hoping that they just go into the week and everybody's kind of. I think that they were keeping people out of the facility. I'm sure that they can find ways to still game plan. Maybe a game gets pushed, but yeah, I'm sure that they have these plans for what if with the NFL well before the season even started. So I'm sure things will be, not complete. Go to the chalkboard and make up a new plan out of nowhere, sort of thing. So, wide receivers for the week, which is tough because I mean there's so many of them. But who did you take?
Well, I have two guys. As you said moments ago, it's always good to have a backup plan.
Here you go.
My first wide receiver start of the week is Bobby Trees, Robert Woods. The Rams are home against the Giants, and looking at my notes, the Giants are ranked 22nd overall against the run. Against the pass. So I have Woods about 9 or 10 targets. He's going to catch 7 or 8 of those targets. Yep. 95 to 100 yards, and he will score on Sunday. So Robert Woods is my first wide receiver start of the week. And the second one is, we've already touched about it, but he's fantastic, and it's a great story, let's say. Allen Robinson. They look good, especially with Foles at quarterback. I expect Allen Robinson to get 11 or 12 targets. I mean, he's going to be that highly loosed, and he's going to catch 9 or 10 balls. I got him around. And again, this is all from my gut. This isn't going to be in my projections. My rankings will reflect this, but I have him well over 100 yards, 110, 115 receiving yards, and a touchdown on Sunday. So Robert Woods and Allen Robinson, my wide receiver starts of the week.
I like it. I think Woods might be one of my personally one of my most rostered players, just because you got to love a guy who's getting consistently somewhere between 9 and like 14 targets all the time, and he catches the ball efficiently. So I love Woods, and that's a good call right there. I wrote down, and this is a little bit of a dart throw here, but I wrote down N'Keal Harry from the Patriots versus the Chiefs, and the reason I did that is because week 2, when Cam had to throw the ball a lot, he had 12 targets go to N'Keal Harry. Outside of that game, N'Keal Harry's been pretty average, but they also haven't been really throwing the ball as much as other teams. This past week, we saw Rex Burkhead and Stoney Michel have great games, which surprised pretty much everybody. So I think in a game where you're playing the Chiefs, Cam is going to have to throw the ball a lot. We know, Edelman is a reliable guy, but I think Cam showed us that he does have some trust in N'Keal Harry. We saw on the sideline that video of Cam like sliding out of his chair, making a joke. I'm pretty sure N'Keal Harry was the guy next to him. I see a game where N'Keal Harry is targeted somewhere between 8 and 10 times. And I think if he finds the end zone against the Chiefs, which will be tough, but I think if he does, then he's going to have a nice fantasy week.
I agree with you. Who am I to argue? And that Cam Newton meme is fantastic. That's the new, thank you, Cam Newton, for giving us a new brah, say something stupid, and Cam's, slinking out of his chair. So
it'll come in clutch maybe a month or 2 from now, because I think people are overutilizing it right now, or utilizing it in the wrong way. But yeah, that is a good one right there. Tight ends, as I said before, hard to judge lately, outside of maybe the top few guys. But who did you have for this week for tight ends?
I have Darren Waller as my tight end start of the week. They're going up against Buffalo. Buffalo is ranked 21st overall, against the tight end. We mentioned it, 30, 40 minutes ago, how Bill Belichick probably had a whole plan and a scheme in place to take Darren Waller away from Derek Carr and his team. But this week, he'll be back. Buffalo is a good defensive team, but they're in Vegas. I have Waller for New Orleans. I have Waller for about 8 or 9 receptions, a cool 100 yards, and he will score.
I like the call there, especially if he, had to take some time this past week to get back to himself. 2 weeks ago, he had a ridiculous amount of catches, and I think that's going to be typical Waller, especially with Bryan Edwards and Henry Ruggs out. I don't think you're going to rely on throwing the ball to Hunter Renfrow and Aguilar, or anything like that on a consistent level. You have Waller, who's going to be their go-to guy. Tight end for me, I picked a tight end that has a tougher matchup, because the Bucs have actually been pretty good against the tight ends over 3 weeks. And again, we both said it before, 3 weeks of football, you don't want to judge how a team's defense or offense or this or that is going to be for the entire season, but the Bucs have been good against tight ends. But I have Hunter Henry versus the Bucs, and the reason I have him is the start of the week for me is, outside of Kelsey and Waller, who have a massive target share, his target shares over the past 3 weeks have been 8, 8, and then 7. So when we talk about guys like Evan Ingram and Mark Andrews, who we think will be fine, but you talk about them and Chris Herndon and, a guy like I mentioned before, Irv Smith's not even getting targeted. And, Dallas Goedert, before he got hurt, he was having a hot week and then he was having an okay week. With Hunter Henry, he's having a consistent target share. And I think moving forward, as long as he stays healthy, he's going to be very involved in a passing game from Justin Herbert. So I like him against the Bucs, even if, I was reading these asterisks. Hey, Bucs are good against tight ends. I still will start him this week and be comfortable with it.
I love it.
So we're right at the hour mark. I think what I want to finish off with is just a quick breakouts or breaks segment here. I'm going to take 4 wide receivers, Chris, and I'll let you take your pick of 2 of them, and I'll take the other 2. But when I say we did it last week, breakout or breaks. Breakout meaning we think this player's going to break out. He's going to have a good rest of the season. Doesn't mean he's going to be a top 5 wide receiver. We're going to look at wide receivers. Doesn't mean he's going to be a top 5 wide receiver, but he's going to be a good fantasy player that you can roster on a consistent basis, we'll say. So that'll be our breakout. Breaks mean pump the brakes.
Oh, whoa.
Yeah, exactly. Let's not get too ahead of ourselves here. So I'll read you the list. You take 2 of them. I have Justin Jefferson, T. Higgins, Allen Lazard, and Brandon Ayuk. And these are all guys that had massive week 3s. So out of this list of 4, let me know the 2 that you're going to take and your stance on them.
Yeah, I'd love to talk about the 2 rookies here, Justin Jefferson and T. Higgins in Cincinnati.
Okay, all right. What do you think with them? Breakouts or breaks?
I'm pumping the brakes on both of them, and it's not because I don't like their long-term prospects. It's just, Jefferson did it 1 week. T. Higgins did it in 1 week. These kids are rookies. There's still a lot more growth and development to come here. So was week 3 their breakout? No, I'm going to pump the brakes, and they will be better as the season, moves on, but there's plenty more, football left to play. So I'm pumping the brakes on both rookie wide receivers.
I can agree with you on that, just because we only saw a small sample size right there. I do have a lot of optimism for Jefferson because, like you mentioned earlier, short off season. They said BC Johnson is going to be our wide receiver too, which I never bought into. But I think the fact that Jefferson had a 9 target sort of game and he exploded with it, I think that's good. Higgins, you mentioned him a little bit. He had 3 red zone targets, which again, touchdowns in fantasy equals points. Maybe it's 6 points, whatever your league scoring is. But if he's going to be the guy that Joe Burrow's starting to look for first in the end zone, that could be useful. But he also has to compete with some guys. Lazard. The thing with Lazard is I think he's going to be a good flex play. I just don't know. MVS, I wasn't buying into him at all. I really wasn't, just because we saw the hype before, and he had a good game, and then he was terrible the rest of the season. This past week, again, he was targeted, but he was bad. So I think Lazard, I talked about him in the offseason with you a little bit, actually. I think there's optimism for him. I don't think he's going to be your top 15 sort of guy, but on weeks that you need a person to plug into your buy, he might be that guy, especially if Devontae Adams is a bit banged up and still going through some stuff. The one guy I'm really pumping the brakes on, though, is another rookie. I'm saying it wrong. Ayuk?
Yeah, Brandon Ayuk.
Ayuk, yeah. So 5 receptions on 8 targets. He had 3 carries for a touchdown. So he was almost like that Deebo Samuel gadget sort of guy. What I want to see, though, is how does he fit into this offense when Kittle is back, when Deebo's back, and when Mostert's back, and when Jimmy G's back. We're judging him off of a week where half the team is missing. So before you go and spend $90 worth of fab on him on a team that really doesn't throw the ball a ton usually, I got to see him involved with these other guys. So I'm pumping the brakes big time on him.
I think you're wise to do that, and we're in lockstep together. I love the the long term outlook of Lazard there, with or without Devontae Adams. They're Green Bay, even the summer into the fall and where we are now, they've been looking for someone to step up and be that complementary wide receiver to Devontae Adams. And maybe it took, unfortunately, maybe it took a Devontae Adams injury to force the rest of these guys in the lineup to see, targets and touches, to see snaps, to see which guy is going to, differentiate themselves from the other guy. And Alan Lazard has done that. Absolutely. So I think Lazard is a full breakout, and I'm most definitely pumping the brakes on Ayuk. He's got 11 targets through 3 games. That's kind of soft. If you look at some of, the higher end wide receivers, they're getting like 8 to 10 targets a game, and Ayuk has only had 11 so far in the season. So I'm pumping the brakes with him. His long-term prospects are fantastic, just like Justin Jefferson and T. Higgins. But that's the reason why I'm pumping the brakes. They're young. Let them learn, grow, and develop a little bit more before we, oh my God, it's a breakout.
Yep, I agree. And it's important to look at some of the factors of how's the team look right now? What's the personnel? Who's healthy, who's not healthy? Is this a 1-week performance? Has this guy's role been increasing? You got to look at these factors because, when you're making your waiver claim, if you don't have Fab, or if you do have Fab, when you're spending your money for the season after 3 weeks of football, you kind of have to be careful, especially with all these injuries that happen. So important to say, hey, is this a breakout? Do we need to chill out a little bit? So, yeah, it's important, I think, week to week with that. So, yeah, we'll wrap it up right there for this segment. Chris, this will be on the podcast, so they won't see our mugs on there. So make sure you tell us where we can find you and what you have going on.
Yeah, find me on Twitter at Detroit Beastie. Bottom of the Barrel is out now. Go check that out. It's a DFS article to help you plug and play those lower owned guys, help your lineup pop in with all the studs we know we should start. Rankings are out later this week on Thursday. You can find those at Fantasy Pros, and I will have my favorite play at each position tomorrow. Graphic cards for each guy, the guys I like the most. So hang in there, hang tight. Find me, as I've said, on Twitter at Detroit Beastie, and I welcome any and all conversation and direct messages.
Yep, and I am fully behind you on that. I can contest to that. I know you were a guy early on when I barely had any followers that I could DM and ask questions and link up with. And I think you were one of my first guys that wrote on some articles I had. So yeah, you're always behind people with that. And I will say, big fan of the stuff you put out all the time. There's so much content out there, but there's not a lot. There's not a lot of people I can think of that grind as much as you do. So
thank you, my friend.
Yeah, definitely check out Chris's stuff. If for some reason you're following me and you don't, Chris, make sure you change that. For us, for me, P2W Fantasy, we'll have another article out this week. This will be posted to Apple and everything else probably Thursday or Friday, and maybe another solo stream for something else that we got going on. But other than that, going to wrap it up there. Chris, thanks for coming on, man.
Thanks for having me.
Have a good night, everybody.